Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Greetings and welcome back to the 1950s Fun Chat. This week we have another great guest who will inspire you about the 1950s, and that seems like it was so long ago, but really it was just a wink away. Wouldn't you say that, Jackie?
I've never thought of it that way before, Janine.
Yes, if you blink, it blink backwards, there it is. But before we get started with our introducing our guest today, we'd like to mention in the lower right-hand corner of your screen is the red subscribe button. Please click on that. We'd love to have you as a member and a subscriber of our channel. And of course, on the opposite side of that screen in the lower part, there's the blue or the thumbs up button. And we know you're going to want to thumbs up this fun chat because our guest today is just, I might say he's full of it. He's really full of all kinds of stories and he is full of great personality. Jackie.
Janine, yes. And I invite our guests to look at the screen. While you're perusing it, you'll notice a couple of things. First of all, on the bottom, there's a banner running across the bottom. It's called www.wildthewindmillwatch.com. We would like to have you check that link out because it directs you to our book. And speaking of the book, note the lovely picture in the upper right-hand corner. You'll see a beautiful North Dakota sunset that wraps around our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. Our book includes so many memories Janine and I have of living on the northern Great Plains in the 1950s. Now, we are both excited to introduce you to our guest. He is Cactus Jack Barringer. He is a prolific inventor, best known for the monster arm wrestling machine. He's made numerous TV appearances, has been featured in over 200 magazines and newspaper articles, has sold products on the QVC shopping network, and has been a contestant on the ABC show Shark Tank. Now, Cactus is a native of Atlantic, Iowa, graduated from high school there in 1961. Cactus, we welcome you to the 1950s Fun Chat. Glad you're here.
Hi, Cactus.
I started out in life playing cowboy when I was a little boy, and now here I am 78 years still playing cowboy.
Well, you know, the thing that struck me the most is your name. So would you please tell us how that word cactus became attached to your name?
Well, when I was a young kid, just talking about playing cowboy, most young boys at that back in that era, that was a big thing to go outside and play cowboy, outside and inside. Well, anyhow, most of my friends and stuff over the years sort of outgrew that, but I was always running around dressed up as a cowboy, and my dad started calling me Cactus Jack just as a fun thing. And before you know it, the neighborhood kids started calling me that. And so it just sort of stuck. And then 20 some years later, when I started out being my life of an entrepreneur, I wanted to name my company. And I thought, well, why not Cactus Jack's Marketing? And so that's how it begun. And then to take it to the next step, fun little story is I thought, well, if I'm going to be named Cactus Jack, I got to look like one. So I told my wife and kids one day, I says, I think I'm going to grow a beard and a ponytail. And of course, they laughed at me like I was just kidding. I went on a fishing trip up into Canada for 2 weeks, and while I was there, I never shaved. And when I got back, my wife was saying, "When are you going to shave that stubble off?" Well, that was over 50 years ago, and I still haven't shaved it off.
She must have gotten used to it by now.
Well,
It's nicely trimmed.
The funny part is after about a month, I had not got my hair cut, and I was in the bathroom, and I went and got a rubber band, and I put it on the back of my hair. I can show you my ponytail.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, I put it around the end of that hair, and it stuck out about an inch, and I come walking downstairs, and my kids seen that, and they just started laughing like crazy. And of course, naturally, they were still thinking I'm not going to follow through with this. And I've had a ponytail and a beard the rest of my life.
Okay.
That is part of your persona, isn't it?
Fake it till you see.
Looks good. You've kept it well trimmed.
Yes.
So, Cactus, how did living in the 1950s influence your various inventions? Now, that's kind of an open-ended question that might take a long time, but maybe you could just abbreviate that. Because
Well,
so many inventions.
Living in the 50s and growing up, there's a couple stories that I'll tell you in a minute, but to answer your quick question is something that I observed through my entire youth. I'd always heard the expression, work hard and you will get ahead. How many times were you told when you're young, work hard and you can go places?
Right.
Well, my dad worked for the Rock Island Railroad for 33 years. He got up at 5 o'clock in the morning in the middle of winter, went out and rode on those trains outside in freezing cold. And I would see him work hard. I mean, real hard. But we were living in a house that they paid $600 for 7 years before I was born. And when I was young, we didn't even have indoor plumbing. And so at any rate, the effect that it had on me all my life is I come to the conclusion that it wasn't just hard work. It was smart work. And there's an old saying, you can trade hours for dollars, or you can trade ideas for millions. I heard that when I was a kid. And I thought, I've seen so many people go to work and work 8 to 5 jobs, but never really get on top. And so I was motivated to never, ever have a job. and this is a true story. I'm 78 years old and I've never, ever had a job. All I've done is went from one entrepreneurial project to the next. And I'm talking not dozens, I'm talking hundreds of different things. And
tell us about your first entrepreneurial experience, Cactus. And was this in the 1950s? Well,
I'll tell you what it was. No, I had got out of high school. So this was in the late 60s. One of the guys that I would see around Atlantic, always driving a Cadillac and had diamond rings on his fingers, was a guy by the name of Chet Seibert, and he owned Seibert's Dairy. And that always intrigued me. Here's that guy in the milk business, and he's driving or running milk trucks around selling milk. So I was always sort of intrigued by that. And yet, to answer your question, what was my first entrepreneurial thing? I got a job as a milkman.
Okay.
And then after about a year and a half of working for Borden Dairy, they decided that they would sell their routes to us individuals and we would be owners or distributors. So they financed me and I bought that milk route. And one thing led to another. I was pretty good at getting new customers going door to door. And I had another truck and I hired a guy to run it. Well, I got to know Chet Seibert was my competition at the time there in Atlantic. And one thing led to the next. And I approached Chet on buying out Seibert's dairy. And I ended up buying him out.
Okay.
So I bought out Seibert's dairy.
Mm-hmm.
And at any rate, so that's my first entrepreneurial experience. And then 2 years later, I sold the entire thing out to Wells Blue Bunny Dairy, who wanted to come into Southwest Iowa. And so like I say, I was in my 20s.
Okay.
And had made that my first entrepreneurial project, did pretty well with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we also understand that in growing up in Atlantic, Iowa area in the 1950s, that Cactus, you had some pretty interesting shenanigans that you were the ringleader of. Can you tell us about any of those?
Well, one in particular that when I was in high school, my dad and brother and I, we were always out road hunting, and we came by this farmer's house. And I won't tell you who it was because it's only been 60 years, and I don't know what the statute of limitations on this is. The farmer had a huge field full of pumpkins. Well, that sort of stuck in my mind. And the next day in school, I was sitting with a couple of friends of mine, and I says, you know what we ought to do? We ought to go out and swipe them pumpkins. Halloween's coming, and we'll go down and we'll toss them off of the buildings downtown Main Street.
Oh, dear.
And everybody was in on that. They just like that. So the first night we went out, and we had that pumpkin raid. We had a trunk full of pumpkins. And when they thought, well, what are we going to do with these things? So I took them down, and we had an old barn down on Cedar Street that Dad never used. So we stuck those pumpkins in that barn. Well, the next day at school, some girls overheard us talking about our little raid. And they said, are you guys going back? And we says, well, why? And they said, we want to go with you.
Oh, dear.
Of course, that's a good thing because we always want to get the girls, you know. So we had another raid for the next night. Here is now, there's 3 of us guys and 3 or 4 girls and 2 cars. And we go out there, pull up in the dark in the night, get out of them cars, sneaking into them fields and loading up them pumpkins. And we take them back and take them down and load them up in my dad's barn. Well, before it ended up, there was probably 15 kids involved in that. We call this thing the Great Pumpkin Raid, by the way.
Oh, that's a great name.
Well, get ready for this. The word got around school, and I got called in the superintendent's office one day, and you know, they were asking me about it and stuff like this because I denied knowing anything about it.
Yep.
I went home that was on a Friday, and Saturday morning, knock on the door, and I'm sitting over on a couch, and my dad answers the door, and it was Raleigh Hoffman, the chief of police.
Oh, okay.
And my dad says, what do you need? And he says, well, the rumor is that you've got a barn full of pumpkins. And my dad says, well, not that I know of. And he turned around and he looked at me and my head started turning bright red. Bad.
Guilt.
And Raleigh says, "Can we go look in your barn?" So here we go, heading down to the barn, and I'm dragging behind them, thinking, "Man, God, I'm in trouble." They opened up the door of that barn, and pumpkins just rolled out. I mean, we had literally dozens and dozens and dozens of pumpkins. So the bottom line is they ended up putting a lock on that padlock until after Halloween. And then after Halloween, they had to hire Earl Kenner, who was the garbage man at the time, come down with garbage trucks. And I had to help load all of them. And then my dad had to pay to have it all hauled away. And then I had to pay him back out.
Yes. Well, good thing you were an entrepreneur, or starting to be an entrepreneur. But you
got to start someplace.
Yes.
That has been a fun story that has been passed around at class reunions for 50 years.
I bet.
Yeah.
Well, just to let our viewers know, we are chatting today with Atlantic, Iowa native and now living in Ames, Iowa, Cactus Jack Barringer, Entrepreneur Deluxe. So, and wondering if you folks ever participated in any shenanigans like Cactus had in the 1950s. Good, clean fun, though, wasn't it, Cactus?
Yes, you bet.
Yeah. What happened? Didn't the farmer lose some financial gain there? Because he never got to sell his pumpkins.
Well, I think that you're probably right, and I still feel guilty about that.
Well, okay.
Did you ever apologize to him?
That's why I'm not divulging the name. 60 years later, he might still come after me. I think he's long passed away.
Well, I think Cactus was switching gears a little bit. In the 50s, did you have a car club with a group of guys in Atlantic?
Well, we sure did. That car club, back then, car clubs were all over the United States. It was a big thing where you had your club, you had your jackets, you had plaques that you put in the back windows. You got to remember that era back there. If you've ever seen the movie American Graffiti, that was us. I mean, from not only the people and the characters that were in that movie, but the cars. And well, in fact, you're talking about cars and the car clubs. Well, I mean, let me finish telling you about how this club got started. Chet Seibert, who I talked about earlier, he, his son, Dick Seibert, and myself, and about a half dozen other guys met in his basement. And we had a highway patrolman come to talk to us. Glenn Green was his name back at the time. He was highway patrol. And we talked about forming this club and what it would stand for and what would our charter be and all this stuff. And so we decided, we wanted to move forward with it. So the next meeting we had about 20 kids show up, and we sat down and we drew up a charter, and we decided on a name, the Vaqueros, and the Vaqueros stands for Spanish cowboy.
Oh.
And, we had the jackets made and the plaques and all this stuff. And before you knew it, over the next few years, we had over 40 members. And it was just a phenomenal time. And in fact, during that time, we talk about cars. I knew that we were going to be chatting today, and I found a picture of the car that I had. Let me see if I can pull it up here. The number one car back in that era that everybody wanted. See if that shows.
Can you? Oh, a 57 Chevy?
Yeah.
57 Chevrolet.
Yeah.
Me standing next to it.
Okay.
And if you look in the back window, there's a jacket hanging there.
Yes.
That's my Vaquero jacket.
Okay.
Me back in that era with a 57 Chevy and that jacket hanging there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now here's the neat story about that is that black 57 Chevy had 2 4-barrel carburetors on it. It had positive traction. It had a 411 rear end, and it was fast. But the problem is having them 2 4-barrel carburetors. That thing got 4 miles to the gallon. Well, I worked over at Safeway at the time, at part-time carrying out groceries, and I made 65 cents an hour.
Right.
Well, imagine making 65 cents an hour, having a girlfriend, and then trying to keep that car on the road because every night I was out on the strip drag racing with it. And so I could not afford to keep that car. I only had it for like 6 months, and I had to let it go because I couldn't keep it going.
I didn't know if you gave up the car or gave up the girlfriend.
Oh, I never gave up the girlfriend.
Oh, good.
Still got her to this day.
Oh.
So, Cactus, what happened to the jacket?
Well, let me finish telling you about the car real quick.
Okay.
So I had to sell that, but in my mind, I went, someday I'm going to have another 57 Chevy. So here about 20 years ago, I'd made a few bucks.
Woo!
Whoa, beautiful.
I'm trying to hold this. Yeah, there it is.
Does this one get 4 miles a gallon too?
No, that didn't have 2 4-barrels on it.
Okay.
Isn't that a beautiful car?
Yeah.
So different things motivate different people, you know, and one of the things I've always been extremely motivated. If I want something, I figure out a way to go get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I waited many years until I could get that car. And so anyhow, now to answer your question about the jacket, that club lasted about 4 years because we were all graduating from school.
Oh, sure.
And going on to college and different things. Well, so the club disbanded, and at the time, I was president of the company after we got out of school. So I ended up with all of the paraphernalia and memorabilia from the club. The jackets, the plaques, the gavels, the magazines, the awards. We had run all kinds, and hundreds of write-ups in the newspapers around the area. It was very well known. Well, anyhow, so that stuff was just sort of put away in a little area memorabilia box, and that went wherever we went, and I kept it all my life. And here about 2 years ago, down at the Armory there in Atlantic, they built within that thing. It's called the Atlantic Room, and it's memorabilia from the back in the 50s and 60s from Atlantic. And I think it was Carolyn Key, Dr. Key's wife. Sure. She was in my class. I found out she was on the board of that. And I talked to her and I said, Carolyn, I says, do you think that Armory might be interested in the Vaquero Car Club at all? And she says, oh my. She says, everybody remembers the Vaqueros. And I says, well, I would like to donate that entire collection. Mm-hmm. And so I contacted these 40 members that I told you about. They're now all old people like me. And I says, if you've got any pictures of you in your car when you were young, send them to me, and we'll put that in that display. So it took me a year to put this all together. And I've got over 40 pictures down there at the Armory now with people like Steve Hankey. I don't know if you remember Hankey's Jewelry. Mm-hmm. Steve Hankey was Harold Hankey's son, and he was a Vaquero. And Steve now is the dean of economics at Johns Hopkins University.
No kidding.
Okay.
And in fact, well, at any rate, so there's a picture of him in there when he was young with his cars.
Mhm.
Dick Seibert is another one with he had a car called the Cherry Chopper. And that car was the fastest one in the county, other than my 57 Chevy.
Yes. What kind of car did he have?
It was a 53 Chevrolet.
Okay.
And they had taken that car and souped that engine up to where it was just unbelievable. And in fact, a little funny story, Chet actually helped Dick, pay for all of that. And they had put all that money in that engine. Well, Dick blew it up racing.
Oh, no.
It took a guy there in town about 6 months to rebuild that engine, got it all done. And he says, now don't be going out drag racing that car, Dick, or you'll blow it. And that night, Dick was out there on the strip drag racing, and he blew that engine out the first night.
Yeah.
And Chuck was so upset, he loaded that whole thing up in the back of a truck, took it out behind the old dairy building and dumped it there, and it never ran again.
How the parents still disciplined, didn't they?
Oh, yeah.
Cactus, do you have a collection of a world-renowned collection in your home that you want to share about?
Well, I've been a collector all my life. I collect all kinds of things. I collect M&M figurines. I know you know what little hinge Lamage boxes are. They got the little hinge on them or something like this. I've got hundreds of them. But here, about 30 years ago, I'm watching the Today Show on television, and they were talking about collectibles. And one of the things they were talking about was Pez candy dispensers.
Oh,
and they said one of these was worth $900. And they held it up, and I thought, wow, Pez dispenser, $900? Well, my wife says, the kids got some of them downstairs in a box. I said, where are they at? I went downstairs, dug them, and there was 3 of them, and I set them there on the counter. And I always like to go to flea markets and stuff. And one time I had a flea market a week later, and there was a couple Pez there, different ones than the one we had, $1 a piece. So I bought them, set them there. Well, that is the worst thing in the world can ever happen to you if you're a fanatic like me, because if you have 3, why not 4? And if you have 100, why not 200?
Sure.
This is just an example for
Oh, Donald.
I hold this the wrong way. There we go.
There we go.
We see you.
Hey, Cactus, can you share with us what are Pez?
Well, Pez are a candy dispenser that they hold candy, and you put it in the bottom of it, and then you close this thing down, and then when you tip the head back, it gives you a piece of candy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, those things come to just a little FYI. There are over 5 different conventions just here in the United States. Cleveland, Ohio, Orange, Connecticut. There's one in San Francisco. There's one in St. Louis. Thousands of people come for a weekend to these Pez collector conventions and buy, sell, trade, whatever. And then they have them in Austria, Japan, different countries. It's unbelievable. And to make a long story short, I have the world's largest Pez collection. I have literally thousands and thousands of them. And it encompasses the entire lower level of our entire house, from walls to ceilings to everything. And here about 5 years ago, I made the Guinness Book of World Records. There was I had all the, Pez even made toy space guns. And the space guns shot Pez.
Oh, sure.
And there was a 12 different colors of these. And I have every color but one. The one I didn't have was clear. You could see through it. And everybody thought there was only one that existed. Well, I was on eBay one day and I went into shock. Somebody had a clear space gun on there for sale, and they had listed it for $9.95.
Oh my!
I found it. It was already at $8,000 for one.
Oh my!
Yes.
And so I waited till the last day of the auction, and about 5 minutes before it was over, and I went in and I typed in $12,000, because even if you bid, somebody else might have an automatic bid.
Oh, sure.
Theirs. Long story short is I bought that Pez for $11,200.
Oh my!
That was originally 89 cents.
Oh my goodness! Well,
Guinness Book of World Records.
wouldn't it be interesting to know if any of our viewers or listeners have a Pez collection themselves, or maybe they have a very valuable individual one that you might be interested in capturing for your collection?
If they got, it's very hard to find something you don't have.
Oh, yes, that's right. So comment, viewers, comment below if you've collected Pez, if you have the Pez candy, or if you are a collector, just as Cactus is. Well, Cactus, let's just, in wrapping up our conversation today, let's go back to the 1950s, and we would like to know what fun memory of the 1950s really sticks in your mind.
Well, I'll tell you something that I've always thought of, and that was one of the great things that we did was in our cars, all the cool cars, is we would drag main, car after car, just like a circus chain. Cars going down to the railroad depot, turn around, come back up, and then and by the way, in these cars, we had our girlfriends.
Oh, of course.
Those girlfriends, if you weren't having a fight, would sit next to you real close. Of course, you've got your window rolled down. And back then is when people smoked a lot, so you had to have a pack of Lucky Strikes rolled up in your sleeve.
Oh, no.
And so you drove around with your girlfriend trying to look cool. If she was mad at you, you always knew because she'd be sitting on the other side.
Yes. Did that happen very often with you?
Every other day.
Of course. Well, then we'd go out to West Atlantic, out on the highway, turn around at the Dunn's Dairy Suite, come back, go out to the drive-in, turn around out in the east, going east at the drive-in, come back in and do Main Street again. You sit there for 3 hours and that's all you did. Right? Yes, that's so true. Well, one more question, Cactus. The 1950s was a very influential time in your life. What one influence had stayed with you for the rest of your life, particularly if it involved your entrepreneurship experiences?
Well, I think at the time we didn't come from, quote, means. Like I say, I was born in a house that my folks bought for $600, and we lived down in an area called Bucktown, and so what helped me back then, you didn't like it, but what helped me is if I wanted anything, I had to go earn it. I mowed grass, I scooped yards, I sold seeds door to door. Back one day, I come home and my mom said that Harley Q, the neighbor, said that one day that Jack is going to be a good salesman, boy. She says he was selling me them seeds. my mom told me that, and that's the first time anybody ever told me I could do anything.
Mhm.
They said I could be a salesman. So later in life, I decided I'm going to be a salesman. I've been one ever since.
Sure, sure. Well, isn't it interesting just what one positive comment can help boost the spirit
Absolutely.
of a child?
Plant that seed. Yeah.
You betcha.
Right.
You betcha. Well, our guest today has been Iowan, Cactus Jack Barringer, entrepreneur deluxe, among many other roles in life.
I'm
And
going to
we,
remember that phrase, entrepreneur deluxe.
yeah, okay. We so thank you for joining us. And it's just been so much fun to walk down memory lane with you. So next week, we have another great guest who will be a part of our 1950s Fun Chat broadcast. And until then, though, we want you to really consider what that time of the 1950s was like, with cool cars, as Cactus talked about, soda jerks, and even poodle skirts. Right, Jackie?
Right. But before that, or as you're thinking about it, please be sure to click the red subscribe button and the thumbs up button. Check that and invite your friends, even your relatives. Tell them about the 1950s Fun Chat.
That is true. And if you really want to learn more about the Pfeiffer sisters, Jackie and me, we're North Dakota natives. And so, of course, we've written that book, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s. And you can find that book on our website if you go to whilethewindmillwatch.com. And not only can you find all the resources where our book is sold, including the NDSU bookstore, who will ship that book to you if you live outside of the area of bookstore vendors. And also, we know that on that website, you will see other opportunities to contact us, to engage us in Zoom meetings or events that you would like to have the Pfeiffer sister participate. And we can share more experiences about growing up in the 1950s. So until then, remember that
I want to encourage everyone to join us Monday Central Time, 8 o'clock, for the 1950s Fun Chat. And it's a YouTube program. And if you can't join us at 8 o'clock Central Time, then you can always find us on YouTube, the 1950s Fun Chat.
Yes. Well, we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the 1950s Fun Chat. Bye-bye.